Welcome to Ant RC. The next stage of the strip down and rebuild is underway. So the new 25 kilogram Power HD servo is in place. Now these, if you were to get them from a UK hobby store, are about £80. They range from £80 to £100, but this was £60 from China. So it takes a little while to come. I've had it for a while. Just that stripping the servo out and changing it in this isn't an easy thing to do. Well, it's not too bad, I suppose, but I was waiting until the strip down. So that's in, which is great. And the gearbox is open. Now, I've never had this gearbox open. There's a little kind of motor cover that covers the top of the motor, so you can see into that covers this bit, so you can see into the top of the gearbox. Now when I got it, didn't have a lot of grease in it, so I put in my own grease at that time, which you can see the residue of here. So I was using white marine grease at that point. But the good thing is, it's all in pretty good condition. Slight bit of rust on that bearing here, but the bearing is spinning nice and free, so I'm not going to change that. Everything is spinning really nicely. My MC has been noisier than Andrew's. Now they've always had a different kind of noise when we run them, even from new. But in crawler gear, mine's got a fair bit louder. So I was concerned that it was to do with the gearbox, but I can't see anything in here that is amiss, really. So what I might do is I'm going to put some new grease in it, just to keep it lubed and fresh, and put it back together. So that's a good thing. Don't have to get all that out, and I think probably checking that regularly is probably quite a good idea. And I mean, it sits fairly high in the chassis, so whilst the bottom does get caked in mud and scratched and whatever, because it gets hung up on this is the kind of grounding out point in the middle of the chassis. It doesn't really ever get submerged or covered in mud or whatever when you go through deep puddles. So that's probably why it's okay. The other side, again, the bearings are fine. Spur gear, the pinion's okay. It's absolutely fine. I have got a new motor coming, which I mentioned in the first part of this video. I think that, yeah, I did mention it. From Holmes Hobbies in America, a Torquemaster Pro. I wanted to try a different motor in it. This motor has been absolutely fantastic. Now it's the standard Cross RC 45 turn motor, and as you'll see from the videos that's coming up, we did a very recent trailer run this week in the evening, and it was loaded up with the JCB on the bed of my MC6 and the 1/12 Land Rover. It was pulling a lot of weight, and this motor was pulling it no problem. It didn't feel sluggish, it didn't feel like it was struggling. It was getting hot, granted, as you'd expect. We was going through mud, we were going through inclines, like proper sticky mud, and it was coping fine. So I've spent quite a bit of money on the Torquemaster Pro, and we'll see if it is better. I know Andrew's changing his motor for a brushless system, but I wanted to keep, I like the 1080, the Hobbywing 1080. I didn't want to throw any more money at it because I think the ESC in this is fine. So I just wanted a decent brush motor to try. So I'm waiting. It's been shipped, but it's obviously going to take a little while to come. So I'll put the gearbox back together, and it's easy to change the motor over in the pinion. But yeah, really pleased. It's in good condition, and I think that's probably because it's quite high up. So I will grease it a little bit anyway. It doesn't need too much, just a little bit, just to keep it nice and smooth, and we shall get it back together. So the next thing on this video will be the strip down of the second axle. So there will be a jump cut, and I will strip that down, and we can have a look inside to see if it is in bad a state, better or worse than the front axle. Welcome back, folks. Well, the gearbox is back together and running nice and smooth. This is the second axle that's been stripped down. I'd say it's in better condition than the front axle. So this is obviously the centre gear. Absolutely fine. These are the bearings that came off the centre gear, so they're in really good condition. So they won't need to be replaced. Inside the axle housing, there's not a lot of dirt in there. There's the odd bit, as you'd expect, in the edges. Drive shafts, if you like, or rods, or whatever you want to call them. Come on, focus camera for me, please. Here we go. This is the bit where the bearing goes on the end. Now you always get, as I mentioned in the last video, you always get, you know, where the bearing sits, you always get muck that sits under there. And it's the same on both, actually. So what I tend to do is clean them up with a bit of WD-40, sand them down slightly just to get the rough edge off so the bearing sits on it and it's nice and smooth. The worst of the bearings is probably this one, which again, it's not too bad. A bit rusty, but it's running okay. But as I've got enough bearings anyway, I'm just going to replace them. That's a bit gooey. The bearing's running okay, but that's where I've kind of sprayed WD-40 after a run over the axles. It's just kind of seeped through and mixed in with the grease, so they'll get a clean up. Again, this is the other side of the axle. It's fine. That's okay. But I probably will, apart from the inner bearings that go on the diff gear, I will change out the bearings as I've got them, because while you're stripping it down, you may as well. It's not the quickest job in the world to do, so you may as well do it while it's off. I've just had a bit of a nightmare. These little clips, okay, they go, as the drive shaft comes out of here, these clip over, okay. So you can see here, there's a little indent, and that's where those clips go. So that just pokes out the back of the axle. Now, removing these are spring loaded, and first one, absolutely fine. As also the one I did on the first axle. They tend to fly all over the place, so I keep them covered, lots of, you know, cloths and bits and pieces around me, so if they come off, they can't go too far. However, the last one I've just done, flung off, bounced, and it ended up, because the door was open, on the grass, just there. And I have just spent 45 minutes all around on my hands and knees in the conservatory. I heard it ping, and it obviously hit me and a box, my toolbox that was just out of shot here, and flew out the window. Yes. So despite best efforts, it still went pinging and did a Superman impression. But I've got it back, which is the main thing, so the panic's over. So I'm going to give the gears a bit of a clean up, give them a bit of a wipe down, and then it will go back together. While I think of it, we were discussing, or I was talking about the drive shaft to the rear, to the very rear axle. Now, this is the spring I was talking about. Now, this one's been super glued, but you can see where the wire has started to cross over itself. And that's where the pin was going to come out. And it was, before I glued it, this was really loose. It was flapping around all over the place. It was doing all sorts of stuff. So yeah, new axles are a definite winner, I think. But yeah, that's it for now. So the next video will be the second axle once it's done, stripping down the third axle, I believe, because there's no point me, you know, showing you base back together. This one isn't bad. It was running okay, but I'm just stripping it just to help. So yeah, well, we'll catch up soon and wait for the next video. Please like and subscribe, and bye for now.